Okay, so let's take a few moments to simply stand and go through the basics. As always, is a useful exercise, whether you're new to this or whether you're experienced, because one of the things that it would do is just encourage you to bring your thoughts, your attention into your body. So your feet should be hip width apart, so not too close together or desperately wide apart, so that you're able to feel that there's some sense of support for your hips, and your hips will support your shoulder and so on. You can play around with that a little bit, depending on whether you're measuring from the outside or the inside of your foot or somewhere in between. That will depend on body type, and hips, and so on and so forth. Toes pointing forwards or very slightly turned out is acceptable, but not too far turned out, so that everything becomes very focused. We're looking in that direction. For instance, as I stand here, I'm trying to get to a point where my shoulders and my hips are parallel to the camera and the computer screen and so on and so forth. Weight is forwards, and this is exaggerated. This will give you this sense of tilting forward. When I'm a long way forwards, I get this stiffening up in my calf muscles. So I come back. That will bring me to a point where my knees are more or less above the balls of my feet. And then I don't want to go back any further than that. Sooner or later, I'm going to go too far. And so to sort of bring myself back to the upright, just allowing hips, lower back, buttocks to settle. Though I'm just resting on the edge of a table, and we call this sitting. We sit into the hips, and it starts a process of just allowing our weight to drop, allowing our center of gravity to drop, to root down in Tai Chi terms. And then turning in the center of your body. I'm not trying to move my arms or any other part of my body. As I turn in the center, there'll be a natural response in my shoulders, and when I get that response, when my shoulders are moving, unless I'm doing something to stop them, my arms will follow. So at this point, they're just swinging around, and they'll tend to strike your body in the same place each time once you've got the movement going. Try and avoid sort of holding your arms stiff and thinking they've got to go somewhere. A process of just allowing any movement through your body to move, not trying to direct it in any way other than through the turn of the center, not trying to create a shape or anything fancy. Gradually, you can bring in one or other of the images we use. Most obviously for this movement, I think, is the idea of moving in water. If I was standing in water up to shoulder height at this point and I turned the center of my body, my arms wouldn't move so easily. They'd come around eventually, but they wouldn't move. So for my arms to keep up with my shoulders, I have to find a way to just build a structure in them that doesn't create resistance for the water. And we know what it's like if you get a bowl of water and you take your hand and you just, you keep your hand relaxed, you push down, your hand goes in nice and easily. If you slap the water, you meet resistance. So the harder your body in water, the more resistance you will meet. So moving in water encourages the development of a certain structure, but one that is often described as being soft or supple, perhaps is a better term. Hands will still arrive in the same place because you're not trying to do anything other with them. And we're using the image to program our body. Remember that our body is guided by our senses, and the senses feed through brain and nervous system and other things as well. And so if we have an image of something like moving through water, your body will start to respond as though it's in water. Just as if you walk past a billboard with a photograph of it, I don't know, some food or something like that, you might feel hungry. Your mouth might start to water. Your stomach might start to rumble. So we often respond to physical images, or at least most of us do. And so we're building up a way of moving that is stronger, because we're able to move through the resistance of the water, and yet at the same time not stiff or hard, and a way of moving that encourages a sense of flow and connection in the body. If you've ever gone to open a door that in your experience has always been hard to open, and you go to pull it open and somebody has done something to it that makes it easy to open, you'll probably do that because you're moving differently and your expectation has been that you're going to have to put a lot of effort into it. And because you put a lot of effort into it, it's too much. So what we're trying to do is to build up this stronger, more connected quality of movement through the integration of mind and body. So again, the image of moving through water is a useful one, and one that we try to maintain through all of the movements, fast and slow. Yeah, she's come in. So yeah, just nice and easy. If you've just arrived, we haven't gotten very far into the session yet. Turn your hands out, raise them up just a little bit. Notice that my arms are hanging down, my elbows hanging down, so it's almost like, well, it is like my arm is still hanging from my shoulder, and yet at the same time, I've got this sort of structure that I was talking about. It's a difficult thing to build, and it's one of the ongoing qualities that we try and develop in Tai Chi. And then just let your hands drop down. So in this position, in this basic stance, just begin to rock your weight forwards and backwards. So when I go a long way forwards and backwards, as I noted before, I fall over, obviously, or I have to take a step or something like that. If you imagine this pole when I stand here is a sort of like is inside my body, so there's a center line. A couple of things to think about with this exercise. One is that when I rock forwards and backwards, it moves with me. So I'm pivoting from my ankles. I'm not doing that or something. So the whole body moves, and you can often feel a response in the muscles of your legs and your back doing this. The other image to think about, it appears to contradict, but they work well together, is when I do that, there is still almost like a memory of the center line there. And if I get too far from that, then again, I will fall over. So that center line, in line with the pull of gravity, is a bit like the mooring post for a boat in the sea. The boat will drift away from it, but it will always come back to it. Or like a landmark, if you're out for a walk and I don't know, your landmark is the church tower or something like that. You won't always be heading straight towards it, but it will always be there for your reference point. Hands out to your sides, and what's going to happen is, again, you use the image of moving through water. As you go forwards, the hands are held behind just for a moment, and then they follow through, and then you go back. So this helps us to just play with the alignment of our body, but also to realize that to move our arms, we have to move the whole body. There's that little bit of movement of the weight, which will be roughly between the balls of your feet and the front part of your heels. And eventually just identifying a kind of midpoint, a balance point, which traditionally would be just behind the ball of each foot, as I mentioned before. Feel what's happening in your back and your shoulders, and your chest as you do this. So again, just using your body and the movements of your body to draw your attention in and quieten your thoughts down, so that with that more focused attention, you both get a greater sense of calmness and stillness. But you'll also find that you're more able to work with imagery and intent, as we would call it in Tai Chi. It's not just imagery that we use. Next time you come forwards, when you reach that point of balance, wherever it happens to be, don't go forwards anymore, but rather let your hips drop back a bit more. Lay soft in your knees, sinking down, bringing your hands around as though you're cradling the ball, and then just pushing up. Turn your hands over as though they're draped over a ball and sink down. So if you've done this before, you'll be familiar with the exercise. And remember, there's all sorts of levels of awareness in working with these movements. If you haven't done it before, the main thing to think about initially is this process of sitting. As I said, be careful with your knees. You'll feel it strong in the thigh muscles. Get a feeling of your pelvis almost hanging from your spine, like a bucket would hang from a rope in a well, so that we learn not to resist the pull of gravity, but rather to find a posture and a movement that allows it to free flow through our body. So the exercise is called rooting down. Always the first one that I start with, because the root is literally the root, the foundation of the movement. Like a tree depends on its roots. And when we push up, like a tree, we grow out of the root. You don't lift up your center of gravity, you just push up. And it's almost like, you can imagine your center of gravity were, I don't know, a ball bearing or something like that, hanging down from your body. It sinks into the ground, and then as you push up, whatever it's attached to extends like an elastic thread, but the ball bearing itself stays in the ground. So you're not lifting yourself up, you're just letting your body extend and expand. Now, turning your hands out. So this is the wild goose. As we go through the exercises, different names will invoke different images. Not all the images are going to work for you all the time, but when they do, then you can begin perhaps to feel some of that quality in terms of the wild goose. The idea of a bird in flight, very graceful, but also perhaps an alternative. You imagine your arms are like feathers just being waved up and down in the air. Again, that sense of a resistance, which a feather would respond to with a softening, they're very light, but very strong. And again, it's not a bad image for certainly your arms in Tai Chi. Third variation, just letting your hands drop down, crossing the front of your belly, pushing up. This time, letting your hands come around in a circle. This is parting the clouds. Don't forget that feeling of connection with the ground. We do have an evolutionary bias, I feel, towards upper body, in particular arms and hands. So it's very easy to lose touch with what's happening in hips, legs, feet. So each time you sink down, just give yourself a moment to really feel what's happening in those areas. Do one more of these, and then we're going to go back to the first one and build them into just a very simple sequence of movements. So sink down as you let your hips drop and your hands come down. Bend your elbows so you're cradling the ball once more. Try not to rush the change. Sinking down, turn your hands out. The wild goose. And then from here, letting your hands drop, going back to parting the pounds. Just feeling the movements, drawing your attention first of all to your belly and expanding, contracting there. And then belly and up to the solar plexus. And then belly, solar plexus, and finally your chest. And then back to the beginning. Do one more round of this. Again, belly. Belly to solar plexus. Belly to solar plexus to chest in a process, a sort of series of changes in the body that really we want to feel through the whole practice. Now, letting your arms hang down and then feeling that expansion through one side of your body. Rotate your arm and pull down. This is called dragon, plucks the stars from the sky. Change sides. And pull down. Just notice whether there's an urge to rush. What we can easily find ourselves doing is getting almost all the way down, and then wanting to move that arm, and just give yourself a little bit of space in between each stage of the movement. It's not really stopping. I sometimes describe it as like a comma in a sentence. Don't rush. And one of the things we can do to help us with that, with this exercise, is if you imagine a camera panning across the landscape, it will start with the hand that's just low, and it will move across the center of your body to the other hand, and then you push up. So it's not that nothing's happening, it's just that you can't necessarily see it. It's actually a very short gap, but it's a significant one. And you'll find this is a good exercise, I think, to practice that, and you'll start to realize that there is often that space, generally between stages of the movement. It would be here as well, but I think it's probably easier to begin with to focus on the end of the contracting stage of the movement. So dragon plucks the stars from the sky. One more time. The next one, the sort of pausing stage, the punctuation stage, would be this posture here, hands by your sides. So the first stage of the movement, you push up just a little bit above your head and then down, making sure to take time to let your hands come back to that starting position. Lift again, push out sideways and just turn a little bit in your hips. I need to come forwards. And then back. And then turning the other way. And back. And then facing forwards and pushing out sideways. And back. So this is called pushing in 4 directions. First direction, 1 here. Always taking the time to come back, trying to make sure the stages are about equal in the end. 2, doesn't matter which way you turn first, if you're going to turn in both directions. And then 3, and 4. So again, we can imagine moving through water. That's a useful image. If it's not, another image that might work is that your body's like an elastic band or sheet, elastic sheet. And so as you push out, there's a little bit of resistance, but not a hard resistance again. And then there's just a natural point where everything contracts. And then we push out again. And you may feel that kind of extension and contraction in your arms. And as you get more experience with this, in other parts of your body, most notably, I think, your back. If you're breathing nice and soft, unless at some point you either from me or from somebody else, you've had some kind of instruction with breathing. But my recommendation would be even then, don't feel that you have to slavishly keep to a single breathing pattern or a single breathing method. Listen to your body. And just try and get a sense for what's needed at any particular time with your breath and how far you're moving and so on. Don't impose anything on your body. One more round of this. As you come back, bring your hands back in and then let them drop all the way down. Just feel the weight of your arm and then pushing one hand out so that it curves around out to the side and back up in line with the center line of your body. So your nose and your navel and straight down. So a semicircle around the edge of your body. You could imagine that a wall, they're like an archway you might find in a church or something, and you're just sliding the palm of your hand around that arch. I find this can be a surprisingly strong movement in my shoulder, so be careful with this, and you can add, if it's comfortable, a turn, but if you feel that you're pulling on your back or your hips or something, then just stay with the basic movement. Change sides. Notice any difference between one side and another. And then again, if it's comfortable, you can add the turn. Leaving your arms hanging down, go back to this movement. And when we do this, because when we sink back, our pelvis will adjust quite naturally. It tends to remain level. And when it remains level, that is mirrored by shoulders and head. We're going to change that now, being very careful with your back, very careful with your knees. I will do this quite big so that especially those of you who haven't done it before can see what I'm doing, but that's not meant to be a challenge. As I go down, I push my hips back, and you see now what happens to my head and shoulders. To bring them back to the upright, I let my hips drop down, again, like I'm sitting, and then push up. So this is quite strong on knees and back, but what we're looking for is a very smooth sense of coming to the upright position. So again, be careful with your back. It doesn't have to be a big movement. And this time, your arms will follow, pushing up and easing forwards. This is called rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. Expanding and contract. Do one more of these and using the same mechanism, but adding in horizontal rotation, the center, hands in front of your hips. Sink back, then push your hips back and swing around, and then let your hips drop to come to the upright position. Change directions is polishing the table. Again, I'm showing this quite big so that you can see what I'm doing, hopefully. But don't overdo the movement. You might just choose to do it with a very sort of gentle movement here, very smooth, just playing with that movement in the center of your body. That area between hips and waist. One more time. Good, and stand. So this area, pelvis, hips to waist, is sometimes described in Tai Chi sort of theory as being like the hub of a wheel. And if you've got a bicycle or something like that, the chain fits to the hub. You move the hub, the whole wheel moves. So when we're talking about the connectedness in the movement, this becomes a key point of focus. It's also this part of the body that we try and get to sink, to sit, because this is generally where the center of gravity is. So talking about the focus of our attention, this becomes one of the primary areas, if that's comfortable, from there down towards your feet. Your attention will get distracted quite regularly, in my experience, every few seconds. So part of what we learn to do, kind of mirroring the rhythm of the physical movements, that they extend out, they come back, and our attention will move away, but we try and recognize that. And before it actually disconnects from our body, which is very easy to do, find yourself daydreaming or something like that, just drawing your, just coming back very, very gently. Mostly in the exercises, we're in this stance, and there's very little up and down movement in the hips. There's always going to be some, so I'm not suggesting that you hold your hips rigidly in place. But the next exercise, called bear play, is one where we do actually come up. So we'll build that quite systematically. When I say come up, though, I don't mean that you're ever going to lock your knees back. It's from here to here to here to here, rather than all the way up. You might want to have your feet slightly wider than hip width apart, and you can have them turned out for you. So start just moving your weight from side to side a little bit. And the movement of the weight really is an extension of what we were doing earlier. We were sinking down, we were yielding to the pull of gravity, and then being pushed up by it. You imagine being on a trampoline or a bouncy castle. You drop your weight, it pushes up. Now what we're doing is we're taking that movement upwards, that energy, and rather than just letting it push us up, we're using it to push us across from one foot to another. As I said, we will go up a little bit here. So you go up a little bit and down. So it's a kind of curving movement up and then down. But the yielding movement that draws us into the ground, that helps us to root down, is the key one. There's no point standing on a trampoline and not dropping your weight. You have to sort of start it off somehow. And in Tai Chi and Qigong, the thing that starts us off is this willingness of our body to allow gravity to move through it. And this time, or rather next time, as you go into the movement, just turn. So here I go into the leg, and it's that same side of the body that turns out. Again, I'm exaggerating a little bit here. Push up, turn the other way. So now we've got that rotation in the center of the body, as well as the movement of the weight. If I do that, I put one hand on my hip, and you can see that by doing this, there's a little bit of movement in my arm and my hand, and we're going to build on that. Again, I am exaggerating a little bit, so I'm probably throwing my knees out. Put both hands on the hips. Notice what's happening in your hands and your elbows. They're moving with the body. So the movement, the energy that comes from the sinking down has come up through your body, through your legs, moving your weight, but also turning your center, and is now beginning to build, as with the previous exercises, into your upper body. And we're going to use our arms just to express that pattern. So this time, as you come across into your right leg, turn your right hand palm down and just press down. Push up. Let the other hand come into the movement. So as I said, the exercise is called bear play. It's actually not the whole bear play sequence, just one part of it. I rather like this. I like the image of the bear, quite strong, but also with a kind of slightly soft quality about it. Not that you want to cuddle up to a bear, not a real one anyway. The other way of thinking of this is if you could imagine that your hands and arms are acting a bit like your legs would do if you were riding a bike. One pedal goes down, the other one comes up. Try not to stiffen up in your back. And one of the features of this movement for me is that back and spine really get involved in the movement. Remember that your spine is actually quite a supple structure. It's not solid, although it can feel like it sometimes. Don't overdo the movement. So feel as though your back is being very gently massaged. The bear play. And again, particularly people with a bit more experience, pay attention to those qualities of movement and energy in your back and your spine. Because for once in Tai Chi and Qigong, we're sort of given permission to really swing the hips. We don't normally do that. And so that can really help us to connect with the feeling of energy and movement in hips as well as back and spine. And so recognizing that means that you're in the exercises where there's less license for that kind of movement in the hips, you may be able to recognize this quality, albeit more subtly. And we're going to make a change, and this time you won't be coming up in the same way. But go into your right. Now, you've turned to the left, but turn the other way, and that draws the hand out. Turn the hand palm up, move across, sink into your left leg, and turn your body, push your hand up. So there's an expansion through the side of your body. It's called hitting the ball in front of the shoulder. So you hit the ball. Turn your hand palm down, come back towards the middle, turn the other way, and let that move your left hand, expanding on the left side, and then contracting and on the right side. Notice that my heels are now coming off the ground. Try not to lean though. Keep your body upright. To be aware of that central line of your body. And this is another exercise that I think demonstrates the very dynamic and very strong quality that we find in Tai Chi. Put the emphasis on releasing and softening, calming. One of the outcomes from that is this very dynamic quality, I think, and the stronger quality of it in a strength. And that, of course, is something that is very much related to the martial side of Tai Chi. But we can get a sense of that with this, because the image of hitting the ball up is itself quite a strong dynamic image. So movements like this, the image of moving through water, and all the stuff about correct posture and connection and so on and so forth, gradually give us this sense of what we call in Tai Chi internal strength. And I think its applications go a long way beyond simply fighting. I think it's a quality of strength that is accessible to us. Strength is perhaps an unfortunate term, because we tend to have certain associations with it. Internal resilience, perhaps, is a better way of thinking of it. And that strength can be useful for us in all sorts of circumstances, I feel. So hitting the ball in front of the shoulder. One more on each side. And then come back. Give your legs a shake. So far we've just done everything from the parallel posture. We're going to change that now. You start in the parallel posture, turn one foot out, and you can play about with this angle, but you notice that my feet are still hip width apart. And if you imagine they're on parallel lines, like tram lines we sometimes refer to them, but if you happen to be on a surface that, I don't know, has floorboards going across, that can be useful. So when you step forward with the other leg, it's still on that line. So you kept the width of your step, and you step forwards about the same distance to begin with. You can sink your hips a bit more, you may get a longer stance, but it's never going to be a huge stride. And then once again, you begin to transfer your weight. So you're using your legs to propel your body, which I know sounds obvious, but we often don't. A very common habit is to lead with the shoulders. It can be a very efficient way of moving around, but it's not what we're actually doing here. We want our whole body to move as one unit. We don't want anything to particularly lead. So again, if I get the pole, which I use to demonstrate the center line of my body, not perfect as an image, but it's there. So I'm doing this. I hope staying in line. So again, this becomes a reference point. I'm not doing that or that. I'm trying not to. When you go forwards, you're going forwards to about 60% of your weight in the front foot. You settle there for a moment. When you go back, up to 70. So a little bit more of the weight in the back foot, but not a huge amount at this point. And this is where that sense of stillness that comes from that punctuation, that willingness just to settle for a moment, and it is only a moment, becomes really useful because we can just check, am I still in line? And so going into my back foot, I now just flex my front foot so my toes come up and a bit more weight will go down through this. You can have the front foot turned out slightly, you go forward, push the back knee forward so the heel comes up, and again, a little bit more weight going into the front foot. So gradually, the leg that we're over takes more of the weight. We would refer to that leg as the full leg, and the other leg is the empty leg. And the idea of what we're doing is to get to a point where almost all the weight of our body is supported by the full leg, and that we're nicely in line. Our center of gravity has dropped. So we've got an alignment with the pull of gravity. We've got a low center of gravity. We've got the support from the leg. And at that point, just bring the empty foot in, push out and to the side. If it's your back foot, the ball of the foot goes down first and then the heel. If it's the front foot, it's the obvious way, the opposite way around. So it's heel and then toes. Try not to let your weight fall in to your leg, but rather separating the act of stepping that we call planting the foot from the transfer of the weight. This is not about balance. This is about stability. It's slightly different. So we can achieve stability when we root down, drop our center of gravity, when we're in line with the center of gravity, the pull of gravity, I beg your pardon. So the line here is from my head down to my supporting foot, and I can perhaps raise the knee. If I try that here, I do that, I go to raise the knee and maybe I tilt my pelvis. Now I'm having to balance because I'm going out of line. Sooner or later, I'm going to fall over, just saw my foot go down there. But maybe I can just come back into line. And so this is a really key exercise. And actually, don't worry about the little wobbles. If you get a wobble, try and just settle down, shake out. You might want to try that also next to a wall, just a little bit of support. It's a very subtle quality. But gradually, we learn the confidence just to releasing our hips a little bit in situations like that. Now, let's start from the parallel stance, turn the other foot out, step forward. As much as possible, thinking about what I said earlier at the start of the class, that your toes pointing forward, back foot's turned out, but front foot points forward, shoulders and hips facing forwards. You may find yourself at a slight angle. Some of you may have heard me talk about how we make that adjustment, and if you can do that, that's fine. Just be careful of anybody who tries. This is not just about straightening up your shoulders, because you twist your back, and even if you turn in the center, you might find that you're twisting your knees up. So it's not the end of the world if you're slightly off line. We're not supposed to be, but remember, we are gradually building these postures and movements. And then raising your toes and your heel. So this is a really key exercise. Learning to transfer our weight without losing the focus of our attention and losing the sense of where our weight is going is a real aid to mobility. It will also tone your legs. So it's not always realized, I think, just how much practicing Tai Chi and Qigong conditions your body. It's a very subtle conditioning, but it is a conditioning nevertheless. Bringing your foot in and out. And we're planting the foot. The term planting implies just a little bit of care. So we don't often give ourselves time and space just to consider the process, the act of stepping. It's nice to be able to do that. This time, bring your foot in and either forwards or backwards, depending where you've got space. Swing the foot out, plant it, transfer your weight. You're walking along the tram lines. And then change direction if you haven't done so already. And shake on. This is a useful little exercise. It's not a lot to remember, although there's a lot going on, but we learn that through observation. And again, it's interesting to do this with the wall there. That does give you a sense of confidence. And I think having the confidence when we get that little wobble, oh, what do I do now? You can just, oh yeah, if I do that, I'm not really supporting myself, but it can just help you to do that. Plus, at the same time, you really are paying attention to your body, so it has this meditative element to it. Okay, now have your right foot forward, so mirror my movement. We're going to use that transfer of the weight to move our arms. A simple little exercise called fisherman cast a net. I'll show you from the side first of all. I'll move my weight forwards, and like the exercise we did at the start of the session, arms are left behind for a moment, though they're in water, and then they swing through. Likewise, going back. This is called fisherman cast a net. We start to generate a really lovely sense of flow through the body. They drop down and curve up quite naturally. If the image of moving through water doesn't work for you, then one thing you can try, it's quite interesting to do this, making sure you can do it safely. When there's a bit of a wind blowing, if you do an exercise like this facing into the wind, you'll get that sense of resistance in a very similar way. But just be careful. Obviously, don't go out in a gale force wind and get yourself blown over. So at the moment, you're moving forwards and backwards, you're facing forwards, your arms are swinging forwards. and backwards. Everything moving in the same direction. This time, go into your front leg, and as your arms swing through, turn away from the leg. So turn to your left. Notice how that swings the arm down. Going back, let your hands drop down, sink into the back leg and turn to your right. This is a movement called Wind Blows the Willows. Willow tree being a very popular image in these arts because of its deep roots and stuff of wood. Body contracting, expanding. Contracting, expanding. Good. And shake. So let's try those two movements with the other foot forwards. Start in the parallel posture. Remember the tram lines. Step forward with your left foot. Starting in your back leg, move your weight forwards, drawing your arms through. Fisherman castanet. And forwards and turn. Wind blows the willows. And your front foot out a little bit, or if you prefer to go back, that's fine. But bring the empty leg in, step in the way we did before. Plant the foot and move. Bring the foot in, just checking your posture, alignment of your hips and your pelvis, and maybe just drawing your leg up. And if you're not comfortable with doing that, then just leave your toes down. And remember, it takes time to build these movements up. I'm going to change direction. This is a movement called the dragonfly skims the water. One more time. And repeat. Good. So rub your hands together. And then with the pad of your fingers, lightly tapping over your face. And then over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. And on the side. And onto your back. Around your hips. And down the outside of your legs, not the inside. Onto your belly. And finally the upper part of the chest. So I said, you know, our attention goes out, we get a bit wobbly sometimes, we lose the sense of being centered, we lose the calmness, we trip, or whatever. This is standard, isn't it, really? Life is like that. The last exercise is all about really balancing out that extension and that contraction. It's called Embrace Tiger, Return to the Mountain. So start by sinking your hips down, push up a little bit like the wild goose, and then bringing your hands around. This is the Embrace Tiger bit. Feel your hips dropping back, your hands drawing in, and just feel what it is that gradually brings you back. Just for a moment, and then you push out again. So we have this regular rhythm from what we would call in Tai Chi Yang to Yin, really giving equal importance to both. But again, we have a bias towards pushing out in one way or another. So perhaps it's worth just a little bit more emphasis on the Yin aspect of drawing in. One more round. And thank you very much for attending and watching, everybody. Hope that was useful to you, and hopefully see you again soon.